Welcome to the Merit Review panel. I'm sorry I can't see everybody on the left-hand side, so I apologize for that, but it's great to see this crowd here and to be here in person. We're going to start with some introductions, so why don't we start with Amy? Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm glad to be here as well. My name is Amy Apon. I'm a program director in the Office of Advanced Cyberinfrastructure, which is a unit within the CYS Directorate at NSF.
I am Rebecca Hermanowicz. I am an attorney in the Office of General Counsel here at NSF, and I am going to be talking about ethics and conflicts and how we look and manage those things in terms of the merit review process.
And hi again, everyone. I'm Alicia Knoedler. I am the head of the Office of Integrative Activities out of the Office of the Director at NSF. And I want to, before we say much more about all of our work in merit review, I hope that you will see 4 people up here who are super accessible to you, just as you saw 3 people earlier who are super accessible to you, and that you've done a great job of asking questions. We hope you will do the same here, but never, ever, ever be afraid to reach out to NSF.
And I'm Jorge Valdes Kroff. I am a program director in the Division of Behavioral and Cognitive Sciences, which is in the Directorate for Social, Behavioral, and Economic Sciences. Okay, so today we are going to mainly be focused on the merit review component of the proposal merit review process. We are going to talk a little bit about what happens before that merit review, and then focusing mainly on the merit review process itself, and then we'll go and jump towards the very end about the very fortunate scenario of having an award and award processing. I think the mantra that will be said throughout the entire conference is ask early, ask often. And again, echoing the comment that we should be accessible to all of you. You've seen a version of this timeline earlier. So the main focus for this panel is going to be this blue box. As we see, it says roughly 6 months from when you submit a proposal to when there's notice on that proposal. And there's a lot that happens during that time. It's not a lot of finger twiddling at all. All right, but there is one case which involves situations in which the proposal is returned without review. So we are going to talk about that, and that happens before the merit review process. I'm going to cover that briefly. Important things to remember so that you do not get a review return without review is read that funding opportunity, whether it's a program description, program solicitation, dear colleague letter. If you have any questions, reach out to your program officers. And on the program description or solicitation announcement, you will see listed the program officers involved, and usually the first person listed is the lead for that opportunity. And so that's a good contact or a good place to start. It's important that you understand all elements of the NSF merit review process. Please avoid omissions and mistakes, and please check and make sure that you have all of the components that are required in that proposal. Because once that proposal reaches us, it first goes to the appropriate program, PI designated program office, and that's where we start off with a compliance check. So in other words, we're going to be checking that all of the required components are in that proposal. We're also going to be checking to make sure that the research fit is good for the program to which the proposal has been submitted. And we also need to make sure that if there are any specific requirements, like solicitation specific requirements, that those are also within that proposal. So if that doesn't happen, there are situations in which NSF would not accept the proposal. And what usually happens in this case is that the proposal is returned without review, which is something that none of us want. This typically happens when the proposal is missing some kind of element, or if it really is sort of outside of complete scope of the entire agency. But hopefully we'll cover some tips for why this should not happen. Now, one good thing about NSF is that we do very much, us program officers really do try to find a home for the proposal. So even if the proposal that we receive isn't exactly sort of within scope of the program's mission, we do try our best to find the right home for it, so long as it is an NSF relevant proposal. So for example, in my own directorate, linguistics is a very, very interdisciplinary field. And so sometimes if it leans more on the psychology side, the cognitive psychology side, I might interact with my program directors in the perception, action, and cognition program and say, would you like to take a look at this? This seems more within scope of your program than in the linguistics program itself. And that's a common occurrence, at least in my division. In order to avoid situations in which you do not know what elements are involved or to read more about the merit review process itself, absolutely, absolutely consult the PAPG. You were already shown this earlier this morning. We're going to refer to it a whole bunch because it honestly is the most important document for proposal preparation and submission and all things NSF. One extra note, these do update rather frequently. So for example, we are under a new PAPG that has gone into effect since May 20th. And there's a very big change involving graduate students that we'll mention in a second. So it's very important to be working with the most recent PAPG. So here are those dreaded situations where you might have a proposal that's not accepted. Okay. Note that the PAPG is very explicit about formatting and what to include in the proposal. So for example, the project summary must have a section titled Overview, a section on intellectual merits, and a section on broader impacts. The project description itself has to contain a separate section that is titled Broader Impacts and discusses the broader impacts. It also has to include, if applicable, results of prior NSF support if the end date happens within 5 years, the past 5 years from submission. You must have your data management plan, data management and sharing plan. That's required. It is a supplemental document that's submitted with your proposal. And here's one of these new changes. For the mentoring plan, it used to be the case that only if postdocs were included, you needed a postdoctoral mentoring plan. Now, this also applies for graduate students that are budgeted in your proposal. Absolutely make sure that you have a mentoring plan incorporated into your proposal. Continuing on with some other situations in which the program officer may exercise their discretion to return without review. If it's not appropriate for funding for National Science Foundation, in the context of SPE, this might be for clinical work. We focus more on basic science research. So if your research is completely focused on clinical outcomes and clinical applications within our directorate, that would be returned without review, for example. If there are negative impacts to research security or concerns of national security, this would be another situation in which the proposal may be returned. If it's submitted too soon to when the activity will take place, we often see this with conference proposals especially. So remember the 6 months merit review lead time. If you're proposing something to take place in summer, this July, for example, we've seen it. That's too soon. And so that's likely to be returned. If you did have a letter of intent or a concept outline component that was submitted and were not invited to submit, yet you submit, then that could be a reason for not reviewing. And another one that's really important, if it's the same proposal that you're submitting to another program within NSF, right? Then that would be returned without review. Formatting is a big deal. So please, please, please follow the guidelines that are outlined in the PAPG as well as the program solicitation or DCL. That's where you're going to find this information. Read it over. If you have questions, reach out to your program officer. If it's not responsive to the opportunity itself, don't try to submit stretch cases. Rather, contact first, see if, even if it doesn't quite squarely fit with what the opportunity says, let the program officer know, share your idea. We're happy to provide feedback. If it doesn't meet the deadline, some programs have deadlines, some have target dates, some have target windows. Regardless, if it doesn't meet a deadline, then that would be not reviewed. If it was previously reviewed and declined and the turnaround was very quick, that would be another situation in which the program officer can return it, saying that it needs substantial revision before returning to the program. If it duplicates a proposal that's been awarded, that's another condition in which we can return with that review. And once again, if it's missing any section of the proposal that's required, that would be grounds for reviewing or returning with that review. All right, I'm passing it on.
So before we go on.
Can I interrupt real quick with a question?
Sure.
So we had a question
Thanks.
asking, well, first of all, thanking you for encouraging people to reach out and contact program officers. What would you suggest if somebody has tried that and been unsuccessful in getting a reply from an NSF program officer? What should the next step be?
The next step should be try again. It's true that there are sort of waves, that peak and ebb at NSF in terms of our own review cycle and the way that we're running our programs. And unfortunately, when it's a particularly busy time, it could be the case that an email slips through the cracks, to just be blunt about it. And so don't take it as not interest. It's probably just a poor PO that's a little bit overwhelmed in that moment and did not mark it for follow-up, and just try again. Another thing is if the program solicitation or description has multiple program officers in it, then emailing everybody at once, so just include the email to the whole group. That's something, at least in our directorate, that we practice. Then that sort of ensures at least somebody is going to be responding, and any one of us can respond to the types of questions that you're asking. But just let me remind you, it's not the entire directorate, rather everybody in the program. Just let me be clear about that.
Like on a solicitation. Yeah. So I think we have two questions in the room. So why don't we start right here?
Hey, thank you. Elia Brahimi from UNC Wilmington. Have NSF ever considered creating outline or kind of a formatting template like Overleaf or LaTeX or Word document for people to use? Like in my university, we created one for ourselves. It's like floating around with people, but formats change, and having like an official one would help people.
Do you really want us to do that?
Part of the issue is that so many programs have different things that they require, and they change. And there's constant sort of program review, and that might update a solicitation and might remove a requirement or add a requirement or change what should go in that requirement. And so I think it might be a little bit difficult, at least to get an agency-wide template, but that's a good idea.
Question over here.
Hi, this is Bernardo Flores from San Jose State University. Given the new regulations that needs to include a mentoring plan when we're dealing with graduate students, does that apply also when we're dealing with solicitations where the focus is with exchange of students, which should already include a mentoring plan?
I would say that I'm not familiar with that format just because I don't have a program that does that, but I would say that any solicitation sort of the requirements supersede the basic requirements. So whatever is sort of the basic requirements in PAPG, that's what you're going to put in. But if a solicitation says, do this, then you need to make sure that you're doing that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to this slide and add one more. With the transition from one PAPG to another, there are often times that if you submit, especially if you think that you're submitting early to not have to do the rules of the new PAPG, we're going to return that if the due date happens to be after the PAPG time. So I've already seen some of those already just now, like last 2 weeks or so. So please, we treat our deadlines pretty seriously. We set up the rules. When we have rules, they're pretty explicit, so we do expect you to follow them. Okay, so I'm going to talk about merit review in kind of the principle and criteria and policy kind of way. And we encourage questions here too. So if you're online, please ask questions and we'll get those when we go from one speaker to the next. And then if you're in the room, get ready to ask questions as we go. So as you know, all NSF projects and proposals need to be of the highest quality. We're looking to evaluate them based on the meritorious nature of those projects. And you see in the second bullet here, this term that says, in the aggregate, that these NSF projects should be contributing broadly to achieving societal goals. That language, the kind of translation of that means that project by project, your project might not necessarily reach a societal goal, but together with other projects and other areas that focus in similar ways to you, we will consider those as being kind of collectively getting to those goals as opposed to one project by another. So we like it when you're saying your broader impacts. I'm going to say a little bit more about this in a few minutes, that you're very explicit about how you see the broader impacts of the work, or how your investigators, if you're working with investigators and you're not a PI yourself, helping people translate to be explicit about how you see the broader impacts of that work. That helps the program officers, the reviewers, and others kind of pull all of the pieces together and say, well, in the aggregate, it looks like a lot of these projects are helping us get more towards a goal in research security or something like that. So please know that we're looking for you to evaluate the broader impacts of your projects, and then we look at them collectively. And then finally on this slide, meaningful assessment and evaluation of projects are based on appropriate metrics. And as I will talk about, but we've already mentioned intellectual merit and broader impacts, but sometimes there are other solicitation-specific review criteria that your proposal will also be evaluated utilizing. So we want to make sure that you understand that there's a multitude, kind of a rubric that we're using in most evaluations. So let's talk about that a little bit. So in each one of our solicitations, as well as the PAPG, we are articulating the 2 review criteria. And the next few slides are going to be using some of the policy language around those merit review criteria. So the first 2 there, the smaller font size, intellectual merit, that's one of our review criteria. And this is sort of the advancing new knowledge criterion. And the broader impacts encompasses the potential to benefit society and contribute to the achievement of specific and desired outcomes. Not all broader impacts are actually going to benefit society, and that is okay. And as we have heard already, that the types of broader impacts that you'll associate with your project really is up to you. But if you don't articulate it clearly, it's going to be hard for reviewers and program officers and other staff at NSF to understand that. And so that's where it's key to, again, if you're a PI submitting proposals, have a broader impacts sense of your research program. In the community of broader impacts professionals, they call it a broader impacts framework or a broader impacts identity. Just like you have a research program and you know what's in that research program and you know how to think about it and you know how all the different parts of your program come together, your methodologies, your statistics, the research questions you ask, you could do that same sort of thing with broader impacts. Broader impacts doesn't have to be a one-off thing that you just connect in one proposal and not another one. It can be the way in which you shape broader impacts for your research program for an entire career. So think about it that way, and that might help think about how to focus your broader impacts. So these elements listed here are part of the review criteria. So when reviewers look at your proposals, they're evaluating intellectual merit and broader impacts, and they are using these 5 elements to consider both merit review criteria, intellectual merit and broader impacts. So, and this takes a little practice. How many people read this a lot? Okay. Thank you for being honest. It is helpful. Maybe every time there's a new PAPG, you should just read this section again. And it would be your annual refresher to the 5 elements. So I'm going to go through this a little slowly then. So what's the potential for the proposed activity to advance knowledge, again, that's intellectual merit, and benefit society or have desired outcomes? That says societal outcomes, but I already said it can be a little broader than that. And those are the two review criteria, and those are questions that reviewers are asking of your proposal. So if your proposal isn't addressing this question or these two questions in the sections, in the project summary, in the project description, then it's very hard for them to understand what it is that you're focused on. So then the next element, to what extent do the proposed activities suggest and explore creative, original, or potentially transformative concepts? Now, this is an opportunity for you to talk about how your work stands out from other previously published or previously known work. It is not the case that all projects have to be absolutely new and completely transformative and not building upon past work. So this is something that we have a lot of discussions about with the board, the National Science Board, as well as inside of NSF. And sometimes people will read this and say, well, if this applies to both intellectual merit and broader impacts, that means that broader impacts have to be new each and every proposal that I submit. That is not true. I'll say that again. It is not true that your broader impacts have to be new and innovative and potentially transformative every proposal you submit. You could have, again, like I said before, a broader impacts framework that you're building on across your career, and it's the same kinds of activities, and you're evolving them, and you're adding to them, and you're building it out to be successful. But these are things that, again, you can articulate in your proposal to say, here's what's new, here's what's different, here's how I'm taking a different bend on this, here's how I'm asking a different type of question. Articulate these things so reviewers and the staff at NSF can see it. Is the plan for carrying out proposed activities well-reasoned, well-organized, and based on sound rationale? And does the plan incorporate a mechanism to assess success? How many people feel like they do this really, really well? Thank you for being honest again. I'm sorry I can't see people online, but we have a lot of honesty in the room here. So this is, again, places where you can articulate in your proposals why you think why you're selecting this particular methodology, why you're going to create your program to do this, how you're going to evaluate a particular program or aspect of your project. Even in your mentoring plans, why are you choosing to mentor people this way versus another way? There's a lot of evidence you could lean on as well. You could borrow evidence outside your own discipline and say, hey, I've been reading up on the best ways in which to implement undergraduate research experiences, and so that's why I'm going to choose to do my undergraduate research approach this way. And giving that kind of, again, very clear context to reviewers can help them evaluate this in a positive way to help show that you do have well-reasoned and well-thought-out ideas. How well qualified is the individual, team, or institution to conduct the proposed activities? Now, how many people think this is a code for you have to be at a top institution to get funded by NSF? Okay, I see a few little hands. It's not code. It's not code. We accept proposals and award grants to all types of investigators, institutions, organizations. So this means that you should tell us your context. Give us information. Jean talked about facilities, equipment, and other resources. That's an excellent place to give context to your institution in case you think reviewers don't know much about your institution. I was in an EPSCoR state before I came to NSF, and there were all sorts of things that people thought about EPSCoR states that just aren't true. So I would use facilities, equipment, and other resources to tell them that my institution had almost 30,000 students and that we had top-notch equipment and facilities, that we had invested in and grown our research programs over time. So I gave a lot of context because I knew that there might be a few people who just didn't know much about my institution. And so then in my proposal, I would talk about why my team why my investigators, why my students were the right ones to be doing this particular work at this particular time, at this particular institution. And I was very explicit about it. I didn't make assumptions that they already knew this. And that's very helpful. I think that's the best approach to take. And then finally, are there adequate resources available to the PI, either at the home institution or through collaborations, to carry out the proposed activities? And this, again, is an opportunity for you to very clearly articulate in your proposals where your equipment, where your facilities, where your partnerships reside. What do they look like? And again, facilities, equipment, and other resources is a great place to put some kind of boilerplate language. Don't think that reviewers are going to go there and read a whole bunch of the details. So you need to cross-reference from your project description into your facilities, equipment, and other resources. But you also need to give enough information in the project description so that reviewers can review that clearly. And if you have questions.
We have a couple questions back here. You mentioned that the criteria are kind of a rubric. Has NSF considered making it an actual rubric so that when generating a proposal, one is able to think clearly and strategically about how each element of the review criteria are being weighted?
So I can't speak for all of NSF, but I know that different programs have different ways in which to talk to reviewers before the review processes start. And it really aligns with how the solicitations are written. So there's a lot of detail in the solicitations. Again, I already mentioned these potential solicitation-specific review criteria, and that might add on to different aspects of proposals as they're being evaluated. But everything is kind of, the umbrella is the intellectual merit and broader impacts. And each reviewer is asked to review the strengths and weaknesses or evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of both of those review criteria. So that's kind of the basic rubric. And then if it gets more elaborate, it's because the solicitation has articulated that to you, the people who are applying, because we don't want to evaluate secret things that you don't already know about. That's not what we're trying to do. We want you to be successful. So we tell you how we're going to review things. And so you know it here and you know it in the solicitation. And because things are different across programs and across solicitations, there's not just one way to do it. Is there another question?
Yes, we have another question.
And then we'll go to the room.
We're wondering if you can, provide any insight or, help us out with what to look for in developing broader impact statements, trying to help somebody out, particularly with qualitative research.
So I think I heard the question being that how can we help
Can
out?
you share any resources or insight, just a little help?
Do you want to take
Anybody any insight?
Is that part of your program, qualitative research?
It can be.
Okay, why don't you give it a try?
All right. Well, so was it specifically on broader impacts as well, or?
Yes.
It was?
Yes.
Okay. So just in terms of the broader impacts themselves, I mean, I think honestly, the things that we want to avoid, it's good to start with what we want to avoid, which is we oftentimes, again, I do language-based research. We see things that say this may have implications for education. This may have implications for society and health. And those are just, it might be true, may have implications for ASR technologies. That's a really common one. That might be true, but it's too abstract, right? It's too far removed from what the team itself can do. And so what we're looking for is what creative and passionate activities are you and your group willing to engage in that's going to impact whether it be a local environment all the way up to the national to the international stage, right? This can be enacted through training, through outreach, through public dissemination, through incorporation of citizen science. It's what you desire to do. That's important. So it's not what we want you to do, rather it's what actionable things, right, can your group engage in? And how do you assess that you're on the right track, right? Because you want to improve on it. Just like Alicia said, think of a framework. You want to have objectives. You want to have methods for how those broader impacts are carried out. And then you want to have a way to be able to assess them. So.
And I'll mention that there's two professional societies that could have great resources. ARIS is one of them, the Advancing Impact, Research Impact in Society. And that's sort of the broader impacts professional society. They have a lot of evidence. a lot of reports, a lot of publicly accessible material that anyone can get their hands on to help kind of back up some of that broader impact specific work. And then there's also, and my apologies to this team science community, but there's a professional society that the acronym is INST. Oh, shoot, okay. Anyway, it's the International Network of Science of Team Science. And that's another great professional society, especially if maybe your broader impacts is around partnerships and building out collaborations and how to work together in interdisciplinary ways. There's a lot of evidence-based work through that society that some of it's publicly available, some of it you might have to become a member to get access. All right, question in the room.
Thank you for informative session. Then my first question is that can be kind of like an overlap between the broader impact and intellectual merit. For example, if we are focusing on advancing knowledge in other fields, can it be like a kind of like a broader impact? And also, it actually, if it helps the then different viewpoint or based on the different entity we need to cover when we are focusing on the broader impact. I mean that, for example, even we need to clarify that based on the long-term plan of the faculty or the PI involved, what is the impact of this project if it's funded for their long-term goals that they have in terms of research and the career path? Or, for example, what is the impact, longer impact on the societal aspect, longer impact on the students? If it's like a minority serving institution, then every entity is like a broader impact should be clarified on that. And sometimes I have a problem that I think that, even advancing the knowledge, it can be like a broader impact if, then the overlap there will be okay, or how do you differentiate them?
So how many early career faculty do we have in the room? Okay. Do not overdo your projects. Don't be overly ambitious. So you do not have to pick a lot of things. And it's really helpful if you pick things that you're interested in. And even if you think, and we haven't really gone over this, but in the PAPG, we talk about 10 various broader impact suggested areas. I think we even call them goals, but they don't have to really be goals. They're just kind of approaches that one can take. You don't have to do all 10 of those. You pick one that you're passionate about that really aligns with your research and can focus you for multiple years and have an impact however it is that you want to measure that. But you mentioned sort of minority serving institutions and then on another discipline and this and that and the other thing. That's too much in most cases, especially if you want some dollars connected to the broader impacts activities. Then, you're probably going to look a little unfocused rather than having something that you can build out and take shape and move along for many years with the right resources. And that's how I would make the suggestion. Again, just because we give you a lot of suggestions, we're trying to help you see a lot of potential. We are not then suggesting do it all or else you won't get funded.
Yeah, thank you. I got that. I need to narrow down myself and mindset. Then here another question that those actually 5 review elements that you are showing, I have not been involved in any review panel yet. I hope that I will have the chance. And here my question is that literally, is there any kind of rubric that like at the comprehensive level, all of the program are using when reviewing the proposal, or no, each program will have even not necessarily this question, they will have different rubric, different scoring, and are those scoring and rubric are allowed to share with the PIs ahead of time when they are writing the proposal or not?
So I think I kind of already answered this, but the basic rubric is intellectual merit and broader impacts, the strengths and weaknesses of both. And then if you're responding to a solicitation, there might be additional solicitation-specific review criteria that you will be reviewed upon. And that's it. So the rest of it comes from experience of the reviewers, the quality of the writing of the proposal, and the types of things that you leave out accidentally or that you've included and so on. So quite frankly, and I've been on the other side, not on the NSF side, but out in the university side for many, many years. I don't really want NSF to create a rubric that is supposed to cover everything, because there's always going to be something new. something we want to take out, something that this program wants, but this program doesn't.
But
So
if something is released, I think it can be kind of helpful, or I don't know.
okay, well,
And it can be updated. I
would
might like the other documents.
I would suggest that perhaps working within your university, that might be helpful.
Sure.
But the more we dictate to you all, the worse it gets.
Yeah, right.
So I'm just, that's what Jean
And
tells
the last,
me.
yeah. And the last question, I remember that Jean actually pointed out that eager is a type of seems easy, but it's kind of difficult when it goes to the process. Then I have a question that for those different type of proposal than the regular one, like the eager, rise, and those things, then how is the review process? Then what is exactly the difference between them? And also I was thinking of, it's kind of exploratory proposal that we have, how we can understand that by reaching out to probably program officer that, is it like an exploratory eager one, or no, it's like a regular one needs to be something.
Jean, you want to come up here? Jean is going to go to the microphone.
For clarity purposes, I actually didn't say that because eagers are not externally reviewed. So therefore, a difficult external review process would not happen. So you are going to have to go through the concept outline with your program officer to make sure that it's appropriate for the eager type of proposal. But no, those are not even externally reviewed.
But I'm going to leverage that question too to say if you have expertise in areas like broader impacts, STEM education, professional development, these are things that we need to know when you volunteer to be a reviewer. Highlight that you have this expertise because you might end up on a panel outside your discipline or somewhere else. We're always looking for people to volunteer to be the broader impacts experts on panels. So please do that. Tell us those things. All right, I know I'm eating into time here, so I'm going to go pretty quickly through these. So I think this has already come up, distinguishing between ad hoc proposals and then panel reviews. And panel is kind of what most people think of as reviews at NSF, where people are sent proposals in advance, they review them, they come to a panel either virtually or in person. They discuss the proposals on the panel. Then there becomes a panel summary. You get to know the panel summary as well as the reviewer comments. And again, we're doing a lot of virtual panels these days, but we have some hybrid panels. I think we've had hybrid panels for a long time. And then the ad hoc are, that's a single person, usually reviewing a single proposal, not involved in the discussion. And they're just contributing an additional review, especially if maybe there's specific expertise that's needed for the proposal. And some proposals undergo other ad hoc reviews either before or after panel review because maybe it's super complex, or maybe the particular program has a lot of layers to it and you didn't anticipate getting any proposals in a certain area, and now you have them. And so now you have to seek additional people to come in and help with the review. And also internal reviews, so this is again a different type of reviews. When we have these types of proposals that are listed there, we can conduct internal reviews across the program staff that are at NSF. And so this can kind of speed up the process, which is really, really great. So for example, like a planning proposal, if you were doing a planning proposal for another type of grant, same program and so on, but you wanted to get some data or do some pilot work and so on, then a planning proposal can be really helpful. You need to talk to your program officer before you submit one. But generally speaking, those can be reviewed internally because they're $100,000 or less. And then again, the other ones are similar in this regard. So how are reviewers selected? First, much like how does an award get made? You have to submit a proposal. In order to be a reviewer, you got to kind of tell us you want to be a reviewer. We do go out and solicit unsolicited people, like they haven't told us that they want to be reviewers because of their expertise, where they publish. But the other thing is, in your proposals, there's a whole section where you can suggest people. Suggest them, please. It's so awesome to have people review or suggest reviewers, but it is also helpful to know when maybe we shouldn't use somebody. That can be very helpful to us as well. So there's a lot of ways to become a reviewer. You can get on somebody's proposal in the section where reviewers are suggested. You can email us and send us your CV and say, I'd really love to review for this program. You can meet us at a conference and tell us, oh, I'd really love to review for this. And then we're going to say, send an email with a CV so that we know kind of what your expertise looks like. There are a few programs that have like a web form or some way in which you can go and fill out a form and then volunteer to be a reviewer. A program I'm talking about later on this afternoon, Granted. When we said we want reviewers and we put up a form, we got 500 people to review or sign up to be reviewers like right away. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. So generally speaking, you can connect with us. That's the best way. But all these other things on the slide here are ways in which we find reviewers. We have some tools at our fingertips. I would love to create the reviewer selection tool of our dreams within NSF, but we are not quite there yet. Just in case anyone else is interested in that. Okay, so how do you become a reviewer? And I think I've already said most of these things, but just kind of stay in touch. Did you know that we advertise when our review panels are? No, we put that online, and we should probably put that in the app somewhere. But you can definitely be alerted to events and other opportunities where you can connect with program staff, volunteer to be a reviewer, learn more about the program, understand where your expertise might be helpful, and make sure that you keep in touch. If we haven't reached out to you to say, hey, I'd like to still be a reviewer, I haven't heard from you in a while. So what's the role of the reviewer? You should read the proposals. First and foremost, read the proposals and read the solicitation as well as the instructions from your program officer before you write your review. So you have the full context for how you should be evaluating these proposals. That's what's fair to the people who put in all the work to submit the proposals. And then we also like it, and again, strengths and weaknesses, I've talked about that. The plan, if you've given a lot of information about the plan, it's easy to review that. Putting it in context for the field, the discipline, the program, and so on, and any risks and benefits that you think are appropriate for the project. These are all good pieces of advice for a writer, as well as when people are reviewing the proposals. But it's also the case that reviewers are only reviewing the proposal. They're not doing any online research on you or other kinds of things. This is why we say don't put web links in your project description. People aren't going to go outside of the proposal as written to find out more information. So you need to be a good, careful writer. Write explicitly and streamlined. Don't spend too much time going off track. And then the reviewers, as they've read your proposal, they're gonna write the strengths and weaknesses for the intellectual merit and broader impacts. And I would say that 99% of the time, reviewers are given the instruction to write substantive comments on both strengths and weaknesses for both review criteria. How many people have ever gotten a review where maybe it was lacking in some feedback? Okay, a few people, thank you for being honest. But please know that reviewers are asked to really write substantive comments. And so if you didn't receive substantive comments, you can always talk to the program staff about that. But as a reviewer, you should always write substantive comments, not just one sentence. We have a little bit of repeat here, but if it's a panel, the panelists are going to work together to write a summary based on the discussion and give some kind of indication of the merits as well as things that need to be improved. The reviewers do not make the decisions on proposals. They make recommendations to the program staff, and then we have multiple layers of decision-making inside of NSF before a proposal is ever awarded. So there's a lot of layers to this, which is why it takes 6 months. So why should you serve as a reviewer? Well, you're going to gain that firsthand knowledge. We've already talked about that. This is a great way to understand NSF from a different perspective. You're going to learn about common problems that come up with proposals, and then as a writer of proposals, you'll learn to avoid that. You'll discover proposal writing strategies, which is very, very helpful because it's hard to articulate all of the strategies that could be possible. And then you'll also meet other people who are aligned with the field and the program, and that they may be NSF affiliated, funded, a long-time award recipient, or a brand new person. And it also helps you connect and build relationships with the program staff. So I think that's probably it for me. Are there any questions online in the room? Oh, somebody's coming to the mic. Oh, and another person.
Good afternoon. I just have a question with regards to the peer review. If your university is applying for a specific NSF grant and you want to be a reviewer, is there a conflict of interest there, or do you let me review and just say you can't review yours, but you can review somebody else's? I'm just curious.
I promise she was not a plant, but that is actually the perfect segue into my presentation. So if you just sit tight, I promise we will get to your direct question. That would have been so beautiful if we did not have this extra
Awesome.
question.
I'm so glad.
But I promise we're getting to that.
Great. Thank you. And just one other quick question, too. With regards to the 5 areas that you mentioned for review, that last one that talked about additional resources, in the budget perspectives, what if, and I don't want you to say, we're not going to give you money because you got some extra support, but in kind or maybe some additional supplement, maybe from one of your collaborative partners, is that something that you indicate? Or would that be a negative to a reviewer saying, well, they have this amount of money, so we're not going to give them this, or we're going to give them less? I don't know.
No voluntary committed cost sharing in terms of the dollars.
Okay.
On the budget,
Gotcha.
but you have.
You can describe the resources,
Okay.
but Jean's going to be
As
more.
a matter of fact, you must put that in your current and pending other support if indeed you got that support from another, even if it's an in-kind contribution. That's vital that you provide that detail as
Okay.
part of that document.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you should take that one, Jean.
Right. So my question is in relation to the review, when a proposal is going to be reviewed by 2 different programs, the question, I guess, is, does this mean that that particular proposal gets more reviews? And if that's the case, I wonder, is it the success rates of proposals going to 2 programs that are reviewed to 2 programs versus 1 program? Is that something we should consider?
So before you answer, would you change the way you write the proposal if you had a particular answer to this question?
I guess so, yes.
Okay, why don't you answer? No.
We do a lot of co-review in my program, and we've done an internal analysis, can't release the specific numbers. There is no worse success for co-reviewed proposals than single reviewed proposals. And in fact, there's a modest increase that the proposal will be funded. So that's what I can say about the specifics of co-review. And then it's really important that you not necessarily try to write to the audience of each of those proposals. Rather, you need to sort of direct your proposal to the merits of what you're trying to do and make it, once again, really clear in terms of objectives, methods, assessment, including contingencies, right? Okay. That's what's going to sell the proposal and have it be reviewed well, even if it's co-reviewed.
Is it the same number of reviewers?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's right. It depends, actually. Sometimes we will both, or both programs, 3 programs, however many programs are co-reviewing, will get additional ad hoc reviewers. Sometimes we'll see who the other ad hoc reviewers are and say, oh, that would cover the expertise that we're looking for, so we're not going to seek any more ad hoc reviewers. Okay. If it's taken to panel at 2 programs, then you will receive 2 panel summaries.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And there's one more question over. Oh, online. Should we do one online
Sure.
and then we'll go back over
Yeah.
here?
So can you talk a little bit about the time demands for a reviewer, whether you're an ad hoc reviewer or serving on a panel?
Yeah, so ad hoc is usually it's not as many proposals that you're going to be reviewing compared to if you're a panelist. But do you want to talk a little bit more about the time it takes?
Sure. It's a learning curve. So the first one is going to take a while. I say that as a former reviewer as well. So I would say that the very first review that you do as an ad hoc reviewer, and at least for our program, we would generally only invite like an ad hoc to one proposal. We try not to overload that reviewer. I would say it would take a good full day to complete that review, like say 8 hours of solid reading, maybe rereading and sort of drafting out your review. But, the panelists, depending on the proposal load, may get 6, 7, 8 proposals that they're reading within, say, 4 or 5 weeks. And obviously, you need to be a little bit more efficient, and you do get efficient because you know what you're looking out for with the more experience that you get. In our case, we tried to have a diversity of panelists in our review panel. And so for new panelists, our program is really vested in mentoring them. And so we will offer to sort of provide feedback on the review that they're giving in terms of, is this the right length? Is it hitting the right points? So some of this might just involve some communication with your program officer, but we don't try to just throw people in the deep end.
Excellent. Over here.
Is goalie type proposal reviewed the same as normal proposal?
Could you speak in the microphone? I didn't quite hear it.
Is goalie type proposal reviewed as normal proposals?
Goalie. Yes.
The internship one.
Yeah.
Yes, it's externally reviewed.
Yeah, that's externally reviewed. Is that what you were asking?
No, I am asking about goalie type.
The goalie program.
Yes, goalie with industry.
Yeah.
Is it being reviewed as normal proposal, or is there a separate review criteria?
As a normal proposal type, yes. It's not internally reviewed. It's got the same.
Wait for the mic.
Yeah, Jean's saying it's not internally reviewed. There you go.
It's not internally reviewed. What we may have is industry included as part of the review panel to take a look at that piece. But the bottom line is those are externally. That wasn't one of the ones listed that was exempt from external merit review.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Here.
Yeah. So I know we did talk about RWR, return without review. And of course, when I buy a car, I don't want to drive into ditch. It's my aim, right? I don't want to accident it. But if it happens, what are does it eclipse the next proposal that I submit? Is that who knows? Or is it like too independent event happening? Or is it correlation anyhow? It's entangled.
So reviewers aren't going to know that you were returned without review because their proposal is the proposal that they get in front of them to review. So if, let's just say, for example, you submitted and the issue was timing, like with the new PAPG or something, then you can revise, resubmit that depending on the timing of things, if the deadline is still out in the future and so on. But it's not held against you if that's what you're asking.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was asking. Thank you for an answer. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so do I actually have to have an NSF grant before I become a reviewer?
No.
Hi. So when it comes to original, creative, or potentially transformative aspect of the review, original, I guess, is a bit more straightforward. But how do you deal with the subjectivity of evaluating what is potentially transformative and what is creative in research?
So it really helps if the proposal has articulated that for the idea. But if the proposal did not articulate that, then you're kind of left to what do the reviewers think is potentially transformative. So that's why I think it's very important you write about it.
Okay. All right. We are now going to talk a little bit about the conflicts process and how we try to manage conflicts through the review process and make sure there aren't conflicts. So first of all, why is it important? Why do we even care, right? Well, number one, we want to make sure that there can be no accusation of bias, that your proposal didn't get a fair treatment or didn't get an unfair advantage because it was reviewed by someone who is connected to you or connected to your institution. But the second goal is the broader goal in terms of both NSF being a federal entity, part of the United States government, and the scientific community as well. We really want to focus on preserving scientific integrity. We really want to focus on making sure that we are working within the public's trust. We're funded by the US population, the citizens, the taxpayers, and we want to make sure that the work that we do is above any type of reproach, any type of accusations, that we are working in a biased manner. Now, listen, ideally, right, we would have an entire panel of people, of reviewers who had never met anyone else who is submitting a proposal, who had no knowledge or affiliation with any of the institutions submitting the proposals. But that is not how it works. We live in the real world, and the scientific community, especially in certain smaller areas of science, can be really small. And there can maybe only be 2 dozen, 3 dozen people on the planet who know about a specific area of science and are able to review and work in this specific area. So how do we go about managing all of these things and looking at these things? We've had some questions from Congress recently in the past saying, well, it doesn't feel right. It feels like this is a conflict. It feels like this is a problem. In which case I have to respond and say, no, it says in the statute, both our regulations and our supplemental regulations that apply directly to NSF, exactly what the relationships are that cause a conflict. So we have 2 main types of relationships that cause conflicts. The first is ones that are basically financial conflicts of interest. There's a sort of financial relationship there, right? So we are not going to allow a reviewer to look at a proposal from an institution that they are employed at, or if they are a consultant being paid by that institution, if they've been a consultant there, if they're seeking employment with the institution. So if they have either formally sent an application or they've even begun a negotiation process with that institution. It doesn't have to be so formal as, oh, we're actually in the interview process. It can be, oh, I've spoken to them about this. I'm interested in this. I'm considering this. We're having discussions. Again, then you cannot look at anything from that institution, whether it's informal or formal, and it doesn't matter how far out in the future that might be. And then finally, if there's any sort of office, governing board membership, any sort of fiduciary relationship that someone has with that institution, these create what we call financial conflicts of interest. These mean that the individual can not only not review that proposal, they can't be part of the panel at all on which that proposal is being considered. They are out of the entire thing. They cannot look at anything involving that proposal that they have the financial relationship with. There is nothing that we in the Office of Government Ethics can do to ameliorate or fix these types of conflicts. If there is this type of conflict, that person cannot review the proposal, cannot be reviewed in the panel at all. Absolute full stop. The next set of conflicts are what's more of sort of the gray area, part of the reason that I have a job and employed, are these personal relationships. Now, again, these personal relationships are statutorily created. We do have some complaints sometimes or accusations from people sometimes that say, oh, well, they knew so-and-so, or I've seen them talking to each other before, or so-and-so thanked them in their thesis, and so how can they be reviewing the proposal? But that's when we turn to the statute. We don't have to try to figure it out ourselves. We don't have to just sort of win it or go by our gut. We have specifically the types of personal relationships that cause these conflicts. So if it's a known family member, a close personal family member, or if it's your spouse, if it's someone that you're a business partner with, you have an outside business, whether it's an LLC, corporation, etc., they're your partner, you're not looking at a proposal in which they are listed. Now, again, it doesn't have to be their proposal, that individual, they just have to be on their proposal in any way, shape, or form. So it doesn't necessarily have to be your spouse's proposal, but if your spouse is listed as a collaborator or as a sub-awardee or other funding source, anything like that, if your spouse is on it, then you're out of looking at that proposal. Thesis advisor. That thesis advisor relationship, that is permanent. You are never looking at any proposals from a student that you advised as part of their thesis. Collaborators, this goes for 4 years. If you have formally collaborated with someone, you are not looking at a proposal that they have submitted for 4 years. Now, this is, again, sort of where that gray area is, because people will say, well, did we really formally collaborate? We just had a question today where someone was sharing data. He shared data with me in the hopes that maybe I would do something. Well, that's not really a formal collaboration. That's not a conflict of interest. And then finally, the co-author, whether they co-edited a journal, a paper, and that goes for 2 years. Now, I said that this was the gray area and that the previous slide, those financial conflicts, we couldn't do anything about. But this slide with these conflicts, what we can do is potentially issue a waiver. If it is a situation where the relationship we don't think is strong enough to actually create a conflict where a member of the public would have the appearance that, hey, they were acting with bias. So a perfect example might be, let's say you go to a conference, and this has been happening more and more frequently. You go to a conference, it's a week-long conference, everyone co-authors a paper, a joint conference paper at the end. So now you're a co-author with 98 other people, none of whom you actually spoke with. And that goes on for 2 years, and you've never even necessarily even spoke with the individual. That is a situation where we will look at and say, hey, this is a situation that we can waive. We have a written waiver, and we say the importance of this work is more important than this conflict here. We acknowledge it, but we don't believe that it's going to cause bias in the review of the proposal. So we can waive those types of conflicts. When they are not that severe and when they are in this sort of relationship type situation. So again, that's it in terms of conflicts. Does anyone have any questions about this? Oh, I will say one thing. We try really hard to make sure that these conflicts don't happen. However, sometimes they do. And so what do we do in those types of situations? If we find out that someone had a conflict and did review the proposal, if it happens before the panel, that review is completely thrown out. And then that we either get ad hoc reviewers, we send it to another program, we have the proposal completely reviewed from scratch. That review is not considered. There are cases before where someone's been on a panel with a financial conflict and we have to throw out the whole panel and we have to start the whole thing from scratch. That's obviously sort of the worst case scenario in terms of the extra work, but that is what we do. As soon as we find out about any type of conflict that happened, that is what we do. So the takeaway for all of you is that you need to be really honest about your relationships when you are signing up to be a reviewer and you are filling out the paperwork, because it's going to ask about all those relationships. You need to think about the people that you know, and when you are in the process of reviewing, if something does come up that one of the relationships is pinging, you need to stop immediately, talk to your conflicts officer who can then talk to us as needed, and make sure that you do not just charge ahead thinking, it's going to be okay. I remember the lady in the blue dress. This wasn't on her list. It's probably okay. Just go ahead and ask and stop and make sure as soon as something pings when you're in doing that review for us.
And actually, as a matter of fact, even though it's like it happens so rarely, there have been at least 2 instances where we threw out the entire panel. We got a completely new program officer, we had to start from scratch. But when they are that's how seriously NSF takes conflict of interest at NSF.
Correct. And these conflicts, I'm talking about it right now in the world of merit review, but these are the same conflicts we apply to everyone at NSF with all of our work at NSF. Even people who are not involved in proposals, these are the same conflicts of interest rules that we cannot work on these matters if it's involving these people and these relationships. Was there, I thought there was a online.
No, I think you answered it.
Yeah. You've got me.
I still ask another. Alicia, this is going way further back. Okay. You named 2 societies, 2 organizations. I think one was ERIS, was that right? Yep. And what's the second one?
So the other one has to do with team science. So yeah, it's like the international network of the science of team science.
Okay, thank you. I'll look it up and key it in. Someone's asking. Thank you. Yep. Internet.
Okay, I think we're on the home stretch here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the merit review process and how a funding decision is made. So the panel has convened, they've reviewed all the proposals, they've made a recommendation, and they've provided advice about each proposal that's in the panel, whether we want to fund it or not fund it, or sometimes it's in buckets, it's highly competitive or it's low competitive. And the feedback will go back to the proposers. Based on that recommendation from the panel, the NSF program officers make funding recommendations guided by program goals and portfolio considerations. We want to ensure broader engagement as much as possible. We want to cover, if it's a broad program with a lot of technical components, we'd like to touch on all of the components as much as possible. And so program officers will make those funding recommendations. They don't even make the decisions. They make the recommendations. And the decision is made by their boss, the division directors, who will either agree, concur, or disagree, reject the program officer's funding recommendations. So the proposers will receive feedback. So each reviewer will review a proposal, usually with an excellent, good, very good, fair, or poor rating. And the proposer will see that feedback from every individual that reviewed that proposal. The reviewer will also see the analysis of how well the proposal addresses the both review criteria, intellectual merit, broader impacts, any solicitation-specific criteria, the strengths and the weaknesses, and also the reason for declination, if applicable. You should feel free to contact the program officer if you have questions. If you submit a proposal and it gets declined, then it is a good idea for you to contact the program officer if you have any questions at all about why the proposal was declined. Don't be afraid to do that. What you will receive if you're a proposer is verbatim copies of the individual reviews from those reviewers, not including their identities. So when you become a panel reviewer, a proposal reviewer, remember that whatever you write is going to go back to the person who wrote that proposal. So make sure that you say things that are not inflammatory, that don't show any kind of strange bias, that they speak to the science and the strengths and the weaknesses of the criteria. The proposer will also see the panel summary or panel summaries if it happened to be reviewed by more than one panel. Something called a process statement, which describes what the review process was. Was it panel review? Was it ad hoc? And then oftentimes there may be comments from the program officer back to the PI that describe how or why the decision was made. So here's some reasons that a proposal might be declined. Maybe it was just not as competitive as the other proposals in that panel, based on the merit review criteria, and the program officer agreed with the panel's summary of that proposal. Sometimes the proposal will have flaws or issues. Maybe there really was a piece of the proposal missing, a document that wasn't caught in the earlier compliant checking, but it was caught in the panel, and it's something that just can't be funded without that document, and it should have been there from the beginning. Maybe should have even been returned without review. Also, as I mentioned, the program portfolio, that whole collection of proposals that is awarded from a program officer, needs to be balanced across many dimensions, like geography, small institutions versus large institutions, and other factors. And so if you get declined, it is not necessarily the case that it was a bad proposal. It could have been a good proposal, but it could have been in a panel with a lot of good proposals, and it just wasn't able to be funded because of constraints around the funding availability and the portfolio balance that the program officer is trying to make. So should you resubmit? Well, maybe, probably. You need to think about what was good about that proposal and what maybe could be improved about that proposal in a resubmission. Were there significant strengths identified in the proposal? If so, you can build on those. Can you address the weaknesses that the reviewers and program officer identified? One of the common weaknesses that we see for new proposal writers is they don't clearly call out metrics of success. You have to be able to measure, was this project successful? And you have to be able to describe how you're going to measure that. And if you leave that out of the proposal, then the panel will notice, and it will be identified as a weakness of your proposal. Are there other ways? So when you get a proposal back, talk to your colleagues. Are there other ways that you can strengthen a resubmission? And also think about the passing of time. A proposal that was good 6 months ago, and now you get the response from the program, think about if that research is still relevant or if it needs to be updated so that it can be a new proposal for the next deadline. Again, if you have questions, contact the program officer. Ask early, ask often. If you have an idea and you think it might be a good fit, contact the program officer and talk to them about the fit for the program. There is a way that a decision can be reconsidered. So you get a decision back and it's a decline, and you don't think it should have been declined. In most cases, the panel review process has been valid, and it's really not something that you can change. In a very small number of cases, you can ask for a reconsideration. The first place to go is to the program officer and say, I would like to understand more about why this proposal was declined. And the program officer and/or the division director can explain that to you. If you're still not satisfied, you can provide a written request for reconsideration to the assistant director. So that's the head person of the directorate within 90 days of the decision. And if you're still not satisfied, then you can provide a request from the organization, from your university, to the deputy director of the National Science Foundation within 60 days of the decision. And again, this is a very, very small number of proposals that would go through a reconsideration process, but we do have such a reconsideration process in case there was a mistake and something really should have been funded, even though it was not. So why should a proposal be funded? Well, it addressed all the review criteria. It had strong intellectual merit. It had strong broader impacts. It addressed all the solicitation specific criteria well. It is likely to have high impact, both in intellectual merit and broader impacts. It has broadening participation among a diverse group of participants. It has educational impact. NSF is very strong on the integration of education and research. And so a really strong proposal is going to integrate the research ideas into the classroom, into senior projects, into graduate education, not all of those necessarily, but in some way into education. Maybe it'll have an impact on your institution or your state. I work in the Office of Advanced Cyberinfrastructure, and we want to deploy cyber infrastructure that will be used across the campus or maybe across a region. And so that can have a high impact to a very broad geography. There may be special programmatic considerations, say for career or research at undergraduate institutions or within EPSCoR jurisdictions. Other support for the PI, launching a new idea or a new program versus maintaining a program, and portfolio balance. So strong proposals are likely to be funded. So once a decision is made that a proposal will be funded, there's going to be an award, then it kind of gets out of the hands of the program officer. It goes to the NSF's divisions of grants and agreements. They will review the recommendation from the program office for business, financial, and policy implications. That review and processing can take up to 30 days. We're talking about contractual processes here. They will contact the grants person at your institution and begin to have a conversation about how that award can be made to the institution. The NSF Grants and Agreements Officer make the official award as long as your institution has adequate grants management capacity, and most will, almost all will. And here's a big one. The PIs or co-PIs do not have overdue annual or final annual reports. One of the big stumbling blocks, the thing that holds up almost every action at NSF, is if you have an overdue report. So, okay, I just got a proposal awarded. Yay, I'm awarded. In about a year, you're going to have to submit an annual report. If you don't submit that annual report, not only will it hold up new actions on you, it will hold up new actions on all of your co-PIs. And if that co-PI is collaborating with another person on a completely different award, it will hold up an action on that completely different award. So the reports have to be turned in a timely fashion. It's a big stick to make sure that you turn in your annual and final reports on time. And the Grants and Agreements Office will also make sure there are no other outstanding issues with the institution or the PI. And like I said, no overdue project reports on any awards that you are a collaborator on. If you're a collaborator on someone else's award and they haven't submitted their final report, then your award will be held up. So for more information, we have a website, and I guess we're ready for questions. I think that may be the last slide.
Okay.
Ask early, ask often.
We do have 15 minutes left, so we have some time for questions. I have one from online saying sometimes we encounter terms like competitive, very competitive, and uncompetitive. How do these differ from descriptions such as excellent, very good, or poor?
So typically that ranking of excellent, good, very good, good, very poor is applied to individual proposals by the reviewer. Within a panel, the bucketing may vary by program. Some programs may use the buckets of highly competitive, competitive, low competitive, not competitive. Other programs may use a bucket that says fund, fund if possible, do not fund. And there may be other buckets. And those are categories that are assigned by the panel discussion as opposed to the rating that's given by an individual reviewer.
So if I had submitted an NSF proposal and which was declined, those still considered my collaborators, the people who were with me? So it was not a funded project.
So it depends if you're still collaborating. So if you're collaborating on, just in general, on research, and you put together a proposal and you submitted it, it wasn't funded, but you're still collaborating, then you're still conflicted with those people.
Okay, but not just because of that.
Yeah, if you came together with a team and you wrote a proposal and that was all you did and then it was declined and you're not collaborating anymore, then you're not conflicted. Okay. I guess it depends.
Right. That is a situation we would look at. We'd want to know exactly what the relationship was with the person that you potentially have the conflict of interest with, right. And what you have done again with it, because it's 4 years. That's a really long window to go through, and it's possible we would look at how much collaboration you did in terms of putting the proposal together. And again, that might be a situation where the waiver's perfect, where you do have technically a conflict, but we can get you the waiver so you can still review proposals from that potential collaborator. But we would look at that on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. And do all the program officers or program directors, do they write an annual report of their activities so one can read that to get some sense of, what kind of things are being funded, or what do you feel or you see as gaps, etc.? Thanks.
I don't know that every program writes an annual report. There will be information that comes out from the programs. There are also information that comes out at the directorate level to describe, the level of funding and the number of people that were funded and those kinds of things. And I don't know.
Let me just add that it's also a good idea in that case to look at the recent awards that are made in a program, and you can search by the
in the
dates.
thematic area, and you can see everything that's been funded. It'll have everything from the award abstract to all the products that came out of it. So there's a whole lot of information available. So you can know then, my gosh, they already have 30 awards on exactly what I want to propose on. Mm-hmm. And so that's good information to know.
And the way for us program officers to communicate our research priorities are through DCLs. So pay attention to those Dear Colleague letters.
And then one other layer to this is Committee of Visitor Reports.
Yes.
Committees of Visitors, or COVs is what we call them, are things that happen every 4 years. at the division level. So division would be kind of like a department, but division level. And these are reviews of the merit review process. And so committees of visitors, usually those people who are doing these reports are past reviewers. So if you review for NSF, you could also be a committee of visitors member. And then they review the merit review process to make sure it was fair, to make sure it was carried out in certain ways. And then they make recommendations, which every division has to be responsive to. And so there's a website on NSF's website. I think my office organizes it. And it has all of the committee of visitor reports for the last several years. And then we have an archive of the past ones in case you're interested. Okay, where do I want to, let's see. So let's go over here first, and then over there. So,
yes, thank you for the detailed information. I have a question that relates to implicit biases. And so we know, all of us, we have some implicit biases, and particularly in a review panel, these can come out or not. So the question is, how do you address these related to gender, race, ethnicity, or even career development, career situation of the different proposal writers? So for example, we just saw that the statistics about physics, women in physics, that mostly then full professors are getting awarded and not early career, or less likely, let's say it less likely awarded than junior faculty get less than full professors in physics, just as an example.
So in two kind of big picture ways, and I'd like colleagues to add to this. So we do merit review implicit bias training. And in fact, you can see the training online to see what we talk about. I think that we have the opportunity to update the training, and so that's something that currently we are discussing. The other thing is that we have something called the Merit Review Digest that we publish, or the National Science Board publishes every year. The 2022-2023, those are two reports. They're forthcoming as soon as the board writes a summary for them. But there are past Merit Review Digests that are out and available where you can see trends. But we've made it even easier now to get a hold of our data through NSF by the numbers. And NSF by the numbers gives quite a lot of trend data, maybe not so much on the gender individual demographic side. That's Merit Review Digest. That's where you get that information. But, hold us accountable. Talk to us about this. Be a reviewer. Be an unbiased reviewer.
Yeah, NSF program officers work very hard to get a very diverse set of people on each panel so that when the proposals are reviewed and when they're discussed by people from a variety of different viewpoints and perspectives. So that's one way that we work on that. Whenever we start a panel, we do a required briefing that covers conflict of interest and this implicit bias so that panelists are aware of this and can work to avoid it themselves.
Mm-hmm. Has NSF ever done an internal study of consistency among different review panels for the same proposal? And what were those outcomes?
Not to my knowledge.
Excuse me?
Okay, so within a program or within a broader area? It's not all of NSF. Not all of NSF.
Hang on, she's bringing the mic.
Come to this mic.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, no, we've actually done that experiment once. We actually ran parallel panels, same proposals to two different panels. And what we found, and then at NIH, they've done a much, this was a while ago, but they did a much bigger experiment where they looked at consistency across panels. And the result is that there's a general consistency, right? So there is a positive correlation across panels. It's relatively high, but not 1, which isn't too surprising. And what it really shows is that if you would bin things into like top quartile, middle quartile, first, second, third, fourth quartile, you'd get a lot of consistency, but then there's variation,
in terms of the exact rankings within that. And so, yes, there's a bit of stochasticity to the review process.
Thank you. So let's go over here. Are there any online questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I have one. What's the weighting between the program director's evaluation versus the individual reviewer's evaluation when it comes to declaring a proposal competitive or not competitive? What's the weighting, the balance there?
So, to my knowledge, there's no weighting like a quantitative value. The reviewers make recommendations to the program officers and to the division directors who are making the ultimate decisions up until it goes to DGA for the final decision.
That's correct, and we typically use that their advice is advisory.
Okay, let's go over here to my left.
Thank you so much. So I have one question related to the proposal, because you're talking about one of the points that you mentioned is the program portfolio is actually has to balance different kind of dimensions such as geography, small institution versus larger institution. Do you have any insight you can review about that? For example, like if you want to fund it like 50 proposal this year, it has to distribute it to 50 states across the United States, or I mean, how do you evaluate that point?
So I'll make mention really quick that NSF, thanks to Congress, has an obligation that by 2029, 20% of NSF's obligated dollars have to go to EPSCoR jurisdictions. The 28 states and territories and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico that are historically underfunded. So 20% of the obligations have to go to those 28 jurisdictions by 2029. So we're building up towards that. So that's an example of the geographic pressures that we have to balance in the portfolios.
And it would look weird if all 50 of those proposals went to the same state. Yep. And the other 49 states wouldn't like it very much either. So that's part of it too. We just want to avoid unbalance, extreme unbalance.
Can we go? Yeah. Keep going. Okay, over here.
Hi, thanks for the very informative session. So I guess I have two sort of relevant questions, and I was looking for recommendations. You mentioned that it's not a good idea to put your whole career in one proposal and to break it up. But in some of the basically the grants, they're asking that the grant is not supposed to be incremental. So I guess my question is that how do you separate the two? Like if you're breaking it up and then your next proposal, how you make it not to be incremental and not to get point off? And the other thing is that for the early career faculty members, it is said that your work, again, it should not be similar to what you did maybe during your PhD or your postdoc. But then at the same time, if you deviate a lot, then you're going to fall into the trap of like, okay, you may not have the expertise for that. So how do you balance these two, I guess?
You're talking about incremental awards, like continuing grant awards?
No. Let me give a first shot.
Okay.
So it's an important question. I think you want to rethink your framework though, like completely, in the sense that obviously our research careers are perhaps working towards answering a set of your interested research questions, yet you should treat each project or each stage of that research kind of on its own, even if it has a relationship with a prior phase in your career. So rather than thinking about like linking sort of baby step experiments together, what I would try to do, although that's difficult to do with, looking forward 20 years, for example, is making sure that your projects stand alone in terms of the intellectual merits that you're communicating and the impacts that research can do, even if it's building on prior support. So remember that any award, if you're submitting a future proposal, you have to discuss the results of that prior award. That's first to make sure that you're using your award funding appropriately and productively. But second, it's also to think about that link from one stage to the next. So there is a way to do that. It's not saying that you cannot do that, but you want to generate new activities and build from what you've done in the past.
I think we can get one more question in.
Thank you. Hi, I'm asking a question from the perspective of a grants office. And my apologies if this, I'm new to this job, so my apologies if this question is asked every year. Notice of a declined award is usually, with some exceptions, given only to the PI. And review comments are generally only given to the PI. Has there been any discussion of making, of involving the grants office at the declining of the award and also in the letting us have access to the review comments?
Yes, there has. So, but let's talk more
that's okay.
about
I'll take
that.
the yes. That's good.
Because the answer is that every time we did that, we found scenarios where that information was used against the PI in a tenure decision. And that is absolutely not what that information is intended to provide. So since that time, we literally, well, I don't even know of a time where we've actually ever provided. That goes to the PIs and co-PIs. And we give you the decision on whether it's an award or decline, but not the actual substance of the reviews.
Well, great answer. It makes me feel terrible if that is your answer. But we don't always get a notice of declination, or if that's the right word.
Takes a long time.
Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. I think it depends on the program.
Now that's something we can, Jeff, you want to talk about that? Thanks, Jeff. Yes.
Use the mic.
Right. Well,
Use
it
the
does, but if your institution, I'm just saying hypothetically, it's up to the institution to ensure the correct people have their roles in research.gov.
Okay.
And if that person has left and you have not done the job to update that information, you may not get that.
But if I'm I'm the person that submits the proposal on behalf of my institution and I change to a different role at my institution or even move to a different institution, research.gov won't change it to the
No. That's an institutional responsibility, and it should be an institutional responsibility
to remove my role, but my email that's attached to that particular proposal, I can't change that, right?
Oh, that's a good question.
So when notifications go out to grant staff, the email goes to anyone who has that role at that time.
The AOR? Oh,
so if you've left and you're no longer an AOR, it's not going to send you anymore.
Okay,
There has to be at least one person in that role at your institution, so someone will get it.
We are just over time, and I want to thank the panel this afternoon.